Marijuana has been the most debated substance in the past century. Some people praise it for its medicinal purposes, and others demonize it for its potential to jeopardize public health. When we think of the stereotypical stoner, what's the typical character that comes to mind? Probably an unmotivated pizza delivery driver or a teen with bad grades. But these are not the defining characteristics of a marijuana user. In fact, some of the most successful people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates have partaken in marijuana use. The issue is not marijuana. It is the stigma surrounding this substance that gives it its bad reputation. I'm Nathan Ford, and today we're going to discuss why marijuana needs to be legal on the federal level. I'll examine three main points. First, I'll begin by explaining the economic benefits to marijuana legalization. Second, I'll explain some of the scientific factors that factor into marijuana legislation. And finally, I'll discuss some of the political factors that factor into the decision to make marijuana legal. Let's start with the numbers. How does and can marijuana affect the economy? Well, marijuana can impact the economy in a few major ways. The cannabis industry in the U.S. is worth approximately $30 to $40 billion as of 2024. In addition, the illegal sale of marijuana promotes this staggering number to a mind-boggling $100 billion. According to the Marijuana Revenue and Regulation Act, marijuana as a Schedule I drug falls into Internal Revenue Code of Section 280E, meaning marijuana businesses are not eligible for tax write-offs and can face an effective annual income tax rate of upwards of 80%. This means the government would profit more than the actual entrepreneur who takes on the financial risk. Marijuana as a Schedule III substance removes the heavy tax burden on entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry. The government can continue to generate a profit from the cannabis industry while protecting marijuana businesses by imposing a sales tax on marijuana products instead of imposing heavy annual income taxes on these legitimate businesses. Federal legalization also brings increased job opportunities to the United States. People need to cultivate, manufacture, and sell marijuana and hemp products, which would in turn give people work in the increasingly shrinking job market. Currently, marijuana companies trade over-the-counter. Over-the-counter trading can lead investors astray because it's less liquid than stock exchanges, it's associated with higher risks, and can incur higher transaction costs, among other drawbacks. Federal legalization would allow for marijuana enterprises to become publicly traded companies on the U.S. major stock exchange, creating increased opportunities for stakeholders. Moving on, let's discuss some of the scientific factors that play into legalization. Cannabis-related compounds are synthetic compounds made in a laboratory used for medicinal purposes. The FDA has approved cannabis-related compounds for legitimate medical use, but because of dual sovereignty, residents in 10 U.S. states cannot legally access these federally approved medicines. The FDA has not approved cannabis-derived compounds, which is marijuana in its smokable variant. However, 40 states disagree with the FDA, allowing for the purchase of smokable weed with a medical marijuana card. It's a legislative nightmare. It should also be noted that marijuana has been a common treatment for chronic pain since 2900 BC. Indoor cannabis cultivation can have negative impacts on the environment. According to Quinn Summers at the University of Colorado, lights, air conditioners, and heaters account for 11 to 25% of a marijuana facility's CO2 emissions. This equates to burning 7 to 16 gallons of gasoline per ounce of cannabis grown indoors. That was according to the Smithsonian magazine published March 12, 2021. If marijuana legalization happens, limitations must be written into law for how much a cannabis company can grow indoors. Let's now discuss some of the political, legislative, and social aspects that relate to federal legalization of cannabis. Allow me to start off this segment by saying, although I personally disagree with some of the decisions Trump has made in office, he has begun taking the steps in the right direction by rescheduling marijuana to Schedule III. Marijuana logistically doesn't fit as a Schedule I substance. Here is the DEA's definition: drugs with no currently accepted medical use and high potential for abuse. The FDA has approved cannabis-related compounds, and the potential for abuse is far less than that of other Schedule I drugs, like heroin or acid. With legalization, interstate marijuana smugglers will almost completely perish. However, legalization does not completely eliminate drug smuggling as a whole. There's always bound to be a sketchy guy in an alleyway slinging dope to teenagers. Now that we're on the topic of marijuana criminalization, we should discuss why marijuana is illegal in the first place. Marijuana prohibition and criminalization have a severely racist history. According to a law review published by the University of Chicago, Alessandro Clark Asani mentions how marijuana was criminalized in response to Mexican immigrants bringing cannabis culture to the U.S. This led to a rabbit hole of nativism and reform until the drug was eventually made illegal in 1937. Dual sovereignty doesn't work because if a state chooses to ban marijuana, its citizens are no longer eligible to use these federally approved medicines. There's also the logistical factor. You could go down I-90 for 30 minutes, and if you forget you have pot in the trunk, you're now facing a potential felony. After viewing how Americans initially responded to the growth of cannabis as Mexican immigration rose, let's see how people view the substance today. A range of polls claim 64 to 88% of Americans agree with the federal legalization of marijuana. There is not a single demographic of all demographics where the percentage of approval is less than 50%. 50% support of those 55 and older, 68% for those 35 to 54, and 72% for those 18 to 34. Federal legalization also has bipartisan support. 87% of Democrats, 70% of independent voters, and 55% of Republican voters all support legal cannabis. Today, I laid out the various reasons why marijuana should be legalized. First, I explained the benefits to the economy federal legalization would have. Second, I discussed the science behind the newly Schedule III substance. And lastly, I mentioned the politics behind the near century-long debate of marijuana legalization. Even if you don't personally use marijuana, it's impossible to deny the numerous benefits of safe legal access for marijuana in adults. Partake in pro-marijuana protests, sign petitions, do anything you can to fight the good fight. I appreciate you all for your comprehension today. Thank you.